Okay, so today we're really diving into this Sean Combs indictment. The story that everyone's talking about.
Yeah,
And I think it brings up some interesting stuff about, power and image
absolutely.
and accountability in the music world.
Yeah.
And you sent me all of these articles and legal analyses. Like, you really want to get past just the headlines here.
Yeah, there's a lot here.
Yeah.
It's
And really kind of dig deeper.
you've got Combs, who is, synonymous with success and influence in the hip hop world.
For sure.
And now he's facing these incredibly serious charges.
It is pretty wild going from Diddy to facing a grand jury.
Yeah.
Like, that's quite a turn. So the indictment came down, obviously, earlier this week.
Right.
Followed by that crazy arrest at the Park Hyatt in Manhattan.
Yeah, like something out of a movie.
I know.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, for people who aren't as familiar with the legal side,
Sure.
what does this indictment actually mean at this stage?
Yeah, so...
Because right now we're dealing with a sealed indictment.
Right.
But Combs' lawyer is saying it's about racketeering and sex trafficking.
Yeah, and that's significant, right? A grand jury indictment means that they believe there's enough evidence to go to trial.
Okay.
And these charges suggest a very specific strategy from the prosecution.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah.
Racketeering, to me, that always sounds like organized crime. What's the connection there?
So it's about proving a pattern of criminal activity.
Okay.
An ongoing enterprise, not just isolated incidents.
Okay.
So prosecutors use it to target the structure of an organization. So in Combs' case, they might be looking at his businesses, his associates,
All right.
to build a case that goes beyond just his individual actions.
And then you add the sex trafficking charges on top of that.
Right. And that's what takes it to a whole other level.
Yeah.
It suggests exploitation, coercion, potentially on a much larger scale.
Wow.
So it's not just about sexual misconduct anymore. It can involve force, fraud, abuse of power to compel someone into commercial sex acts.
And what's interesting to me, too, is that Homeland Security Investigations is involved.
Right.
Which is not something you typically associate with a case like this.
No, and that suggests that this might go beyond state lines.
Okay.
We could be talking about interstate or even international activity.
So this could be much bigger than we initially thought.
Potentially. Yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking about a potentially very complex case.
Yeah.
With very serious charges and a huge scope of investigation.
Absolutely.
Before we get into the specifics of what he's being accused of, I think it's important to rewind a bit.
Sure.
For those who might not be as familiar with Combs' career,
Yeah.
how did he build this empire? How did he cultivate this Diddy persona?
Well, Combs is really a fascinating figure because he really embodies hip-hop's crossover into the mainstream.
Right.
I mean, he's a producer, a rapper, a fashion designer, a businessman.
He's done it all.
He really has, and he very meticulously built this image of success and influence.
And that image is obviously a key part of this story, right?
Yeah.
Because now those meticulously crafted narratives are being challenged. And that's what we're going to dig into. So to really understand how serious these accusations are, we need to kind of rewind and look at what led up to this indictment.
Okay.
And it feels like that Cassie Ventura lawsuit last year was a big moment.
Oh, absolutely. It was a catalyst for sure.
Yeah.
Ventura was Combs' ex-girlfriend, and she filed that lawsuit alleging years of abuse.
Right. Physical and sexual abuse.
Right. And even claimed he forced her into sex work.
Wow.
And while he did settle that case pretty quickly,
Yeah, he did.
it seemed to open the floodgates for other accusations.
Yeah, and that's when things really started to shift.
Right.
We saw all these other women come forward with their own stories, allegations of assault and misconduct.
Yeah, some going back decades.
It's crazy.
It is.
And initially, Combs' legal team, they came out swinging right.
Oh, yeah. They were very aggressive.
Denying everything.
Completely denying everything, attacking the credibility of all these women.
Right.
Saying they were just out for money, calling their stories completely fabricated.
But then that hotel surveillance footage came out.
Right.
Showing Combs attacking Ventura back in 2016.
Yeah.
That changed everything.
It really undermined their whole strategy.
Completely.
I mean, the footage was hard to watch.
Oh, yeah.
And it directly contradicted everything Combs had said before.
Exactly.
So it made it really hard to just dismiss all those other allegations.
Right. It's that whole where there's smoke, there's fire.
Exactly.
If there's video of one violent incident, it makes you question everything else.
Oh, sure.
And that's when we saw this shift in their approach, right?
Yeah.
Instead of denying everything,
Right.
Combs puts out this public apology calling his actions inexcusable, saying he's going to seek help.
Yeah, it felt very calculated, like damage control.
Exactly, especially with those federal agents already on his tail.
Oh, right.
Those raids on his homes in L.A. and Miami were huge news.
Huge news. And the fact that they were using helicopters, news crews,
I know.
that's not your typical raid.
No.
It makes you think they were worried about destruction of evidence.
Wow.
Or maybe even a risk to the investigation itself.
So you've got these high-profile raids, all these allegations,
Yeah.
and then that incredibly damaging footage.
Right.
You could just feel the walls closing in.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just legal pressure, it was his whole image falling apart.
Right.
Brands were distancing themselves, partnerships dissolved. He even had to start selling off pieces of his empire.
He did.
His stake in Revolt TV, his tequila brand, even his involvement with that charter school network.
It's kind of a reminder of how quickly someone can fall from grace.
It really is when those carefully constructed narratives start to unravel.
And it makes you think about the R. Kelly case, too.
Right, another music icon brought down by these kinds of allegations.
Exactly.
It speaks to this larger context of the hashtag #MeToo movement.
Absolutely.
And its impact on the music industry.
It's almost like a cultural reckoning.
Yeah.
Not just in Hollywood, but in music, too.
Absolutely. And what's interesting to me is how the legal system is kind of evolving alongside these cultural shifts.
Oh, how so?
Well, we're seeing prosecutors use laws like sex trafficking statutes, which were really designed to go after like organized crime.
Right.
But now they're being used to address these cases of abuse and exploitation.
Interesting.
Especially when there's a power imbalance.
So instead of focusing on individual incidents,
Right.
they're looking for a bigger pattern of behavior.
Exactly. They're connecting the dots, showing a pattern that suggests this wasn't random. It was a deliberate abuse of power.
And using these broader laws helps them do that.
Exactly. The racketeering, the sex trafficking, it allows them to build a more complete picture.
But how do we balance that with, with someone being innocent until proven guilty?
Right.
Especially with all this playing out so publicly.
Yeah, and that's something we always have to keep in mind. Public opinion shouldn't decide a legal case.
Absolutely.
Everyone deserves a fair trial. It's up to the courts, not social media, to say whether someone's guilty.
Yeah. Okay, so where do we go from here? The indictment is just the beginning. Right.
Exactly. It's the start of a long process.
Right.
We'll see what evidence comes out, how they defend themselves, and ultimately a jury will decide.
But regardless of what happens legally, I feel like this case has already sparked a much bigger conversation.
Oh, for sure.
It goes way beyond Combs himself.
Absolutely. It's about power. It's about accountability. It's about the systems that protect abusers and silence victims.
And those conversations need to keep happening.
They do, not just in music, but everywhere.
Well, this has been eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot about fame, about power, about this reckoning that's happening in the music world.
It's a pivotal moment.
It really feels like it. And this case, like the R. Kelly case, could change how we address these issues going forward. Well, thanks for taking the time to really dive into this with us.
It's been my pleasure.
This is a story we'll definitely be following closely, so stay tuned for updates.